I made a box and I wanted to show it to you because we're going to make it, and this is a simple box. Might look a little bit complicated, but it's really very simple. Got dovetails on all the corners, identical dovetails, one mortise and tenon joint in here, and I've got a special hinge here that you won't see how it's done until I get to it, but it's very unique, and I think you will enjoy making this box. I want to encourage you because you only need a handful of tools. You need wood, any kind of wood. You could care to use any type of wood you want to use. You could use pine. I'm using oak, and I've got my top and bottom from a countertop that was the hole where the sink goes. Somebody gave it to me, passed it on to me. They took it from a skip. So I've taken the top and bottom. I've got everything prepared. I've got everything sized, and the important thing for me is to get everything sized accurately, which is what I've done. So I've cut it to length, planed the end grain, things like that. And my end grain provision is very simple. I take this piece, 2 pieces of wood here like this, clamp this in here, stick it in the vise and plane the ends, and I get them all to the exact size I want. So the overall lengths are exactly what I want them to be. So this is the extent of the box. These are the 2 sides. They're going to go this way. This is my thin bottom. That's going to be inset, and this is going to be my lid. So those are all the components. Let's set these way out of the way for now, and let's focus on the box because we have to pick our wood for its location, or for each piece's location in the box. So I'm looking for grain orientation. My grain doesn't run parallel to the long axis of the piece of wood, but I don't really mind, and I'm going to choose the outside faces for appearance. I think that's how I want it. So this one is going to be the front, that one is going to be the back. These are the sides. They're never going to be seen together, so you don't have to have book matching or identical grain. So I'm just looking for a decent face that will go on the inside and the outside. Looking at this, this is how it's going to go in the hole. So I've got these planed accurately. I did use a vernier this is a vernier to get my thicknesses to a good equal width or thickness all the way along. So I'm marking this with a triangle on here. So this tells me that's the back, this is the front. I bring these 2 together. These are the top edges of my box. So I do a triangle here, and these tell me that these go on the outside in that orientation. My dovetails are going to go on the front and back pieces. The actual tails is what I'm talking about. So I bring these together, take a look at them, check them for length, evenness, make sure they are the right length. And I'm going to take just one of them now, and I'm going to lay out the dovetails on one end. And I'm going to make one corner. So I'm going to take the piece, drop it onto here, flush with my fingertip to the outside edge along there, and then I'm going to take a pencil line and put it onto that piece of wood. Now normally I would take every piece of every end piece like this and mark them all. So I'm going to do that now because you'll see why in a little minute. I'm marking them on the outsides of the pieces because we mark the dovetails on the outsides, not the insides. So because I've planed these accurately, I can use any edge to register my square against all the way through. So that's my back piece. I'm going to stand it back up in the direction it's going to go. I do exactly the same on these pieces, so I'm going to mark the outsides of them. So these are the same thickness, all of them. So they're all 1/2 inch thick. The length of the long pieces is 11.5, and the length of the short pieces is 7 3/4. Let me make sure I've got this how I want it to be. That's going to be there, there, that's going to be there. Now I've changed my mind on this, have I? Yes, I'm changing my mind only because I saw a mark on the inside of this piece that I wouldn't want on the outside, so I'm changing that. Okay. I hope that doesn't confuse anybody. So we've got all these distances from the ends. These are rough distances. They're quite precise, but they're not the ones I'm ultimately going to work to. I'm ultimately going to work to a knife wall, which is going to be dead on exactly what I want. But this gives me a start and stop for my saw to work to. So these now are marked up. I can set those aside. I can set that one aside. This is my front piece, and this is going to go this way. So I'm going to do my layout on this one, and this layout is going to knock your socks off because it's going to be so simple. I need a steel rule. I've got my drawing here. I drew out the box before I started because I wanted a degree of accuracy. Let's go where you can see here. So now what I did is I totaled up the numbers, and I worked out that I wanted 1/4 inch pins, and then I wanted 7/8 dovetails. So right on the corner, I'm going 7/8 there, 1/4 inch, and then I'm going 7/8 there, 1/4 inch, and then 7/8 again, and that gives me 1/4 inch on that outside edge. So I get my dovetail template. Hopefully you've got a dovetail template too. If not, you set a sliding bevel to 1:7 ratio, and that will get you where you need to be. So we're going to lay out the dovetails here, just like this. Try and work as accurately as you can. The more effort you put, or effort you put into this, the better your box is going to look when you're done. Oak has a little bit of a rough grain to it. So I'm laid out, I've got my dovetails. Now I'm going to square the line across the top. So on my dovetail template, I've got a square at this end, but you could just use a regular square as well, or instead square the lines across the end. As I said, accuracy is everything, but you know, in actuality, even if you were a fraction out on these dovetails, that's not going to affect the appearance as long as it's only a fraction. Now watch what happens. I bring these together like this. So I've got my kite here, my triangle. I put these together just like this. And I'm going to square those lines across the two pieces this time. Flush everything up. I'm going to square those exact same lines onto this second piece. So this saves me doing any more measuring like this. So I've now got the position of my next dovetails for the next corner, and I work accurately, so a sharp pencil works accurately. Now watch what happens. If I flip this over like this, I can check myself. You can see I'm close there. It's actually pretty spot on for the dovetails. So that means now I can take my original one, this is the original, and I can flip these and put them anywhere I want. So I can flip these end for end, square these lines across, square these lines across, and I've got all exactly the same size dovetail. So that's the reason I did that. I do this often when I've got a lot of dovetails to cut that are all identical. I'll do that, so now I can get on with cutting my dovetails. I've sharpened my saw as well, which I generally try to keep a handle on. I don't let it get too dull because I'm relying on the teeth of my saw to cut very pristinely. I'm going on the waist side of my line, which is the bit I'm going to throw away. I'm keeping the dovetail. So first of all, I go square across. That's my square across cut. Clear out the debris. And you know, those first 4 or 5 strokes are going to set the course for the saw. Stop just above your line. Square across first, through cut to clear out the debris, and then follow your line. Drop your hand to the line like that, and you'll have a perfectly straight, dead flat side to your dovetail. I don't alter my body stance by cutting the opposite dovetail side of the dovetail. I keep my body the same, and I'm following the line. Stop above the line by about a 32nd of an inch. That's about a millimetre. Love cutting dovetails, not complicated. Through cut, clear out the debris, and down we go. If I'm slightly off my line there, I'm going to leave it, because it's not going to appear. When I'm done, it won't show. Just ever so slightly. So I took care with this one to get dead on. Okay. Now, in case there's some variance to this, which I doubt very much there will be, this is here, this is here. This is the piece of wood that I'm going to cut this dovetail to. If I flip this like this and stand it up on the end, this is the exact piece that's going to be married to that corner. If I take my square now, slide up, feel for the flushness. You can leave a hair past if you want to, but I'm going to go for dead flush. So I've got my dead flush, I've got a nice sharp knife. So I'm going to go up to but not across the dovetails. Small knife cut, not too deep, not too heavy. And then the last one. And then I go back in and go back into the same knife wall to establish a deeper cut. Oops. Stand up into your knife nick. This one's going to come off this corner onto this edge. So go into your knife nick and make that pass. Now on the inside, I'm still going in between the saw kerf, even though it's an internal corner, and that knife wall wouldn't show if I went all across them. And here's my last one. And I am exactly where I need to be. So nice, so nice, so nice. So this precision, we're working towards precision. I'm going with a 3/4 inch chisel here. I'm going to chisel into that knife wall just a little bit. I'm cutting from the outside face, which is my face, in towards you. Let the dovetail plate, the saw plate, come right up against your knife wall. Once you've got your square cut, start dropping your hand and follow your knife wall as closely as you can. I got it. I'm just cleaning out those fibers in the corner. Flip over, do the same. Plate up against the knife wall. Drop your hand. That's that done. Now we're going to do some chopping. We've got to take out that midsection. I'm going to, for safety, go into the vise. See, I've lowered one side in the vise and left the other high up. This just gives maximum pressure on the sides of the board, and I'm using a 1/4 inch chisel and just chiseling into that knife wall between the dovetails. Flick out those little pieces. Turn over and do the same. So I've got really good pressure on this. It's not going to slip. The bigger the chisel you can get in between there, the better it's going to be. A 3/8, it just goes. So I could go with the 3/8. I'm going to go with the 1/4 inch though. I just feel better. So you'll have to watch it. The narrower the chisel goes in, the more likely it is to slightly twist. So go gently with this tap. Don't beat on it, because you want to establish a decent resistance in the wall first before you start hammering a little more firmly. Because this is where the dovetail shows. That's the inside corner. That wouldn't show unless the box was open. This is the more critical side. So I'm listening. When I hear the hammer hit the chisel end, I hear two sounds. I hear the first one is just ch, 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 and the last one is the dull sound, and that goes dip. Listen. So these are guiding us as to how much pressure we apply. So I'm going back in the vise, in and out of the vise, purely for safety. Follow the rake of the dovetail wall now. Twist your chisel a little bit. That will get you tight into the corner, and just flick those pieces out. Don't twist your chisel, because you can break the corner on the knife wall of the shoulder line. So, oops. There's a temptation to twist your chisel in there, and that can cause a problem. So listen for that hammer blow. A little bit further. And I've got 4 of these to do. Already I'm not quite halfway. So it's not going to take that long to make a small box with 3 dovetails to each corner. And remember, if you do happen to hit a little bit too hard and move that knife wall by consolidation of the fibres, you can go in with a steam iron after you've fitted the dovetail, and you can steam the fibres back up. So it's not always a disaster. So I'm just pear cutting in towards the bottom of that vertical cut. Oops. I've just sharpened all my chisels, so they're cutting pristinely. So this is the inside of my box again. Get the chisel right up against the knife wall, and just a tap, not heavily. Give the chisel time to cut, give that cutting edge time to cut. This one should go through, I think. Yeah. So I've got my chisel choked up on, so I don't chisel into my bench top. So I stopped about 1/8 of an inch from my bench top, and that's my template made now. I can draw around those onto the adjacent piece. If you see a little bit of red blood on the piece here, it's because I just nicked the corner of my finger. So I'm just pear cutting these end grain fibres just with a pear cut to take off the fuzzy ends, because that will hold you up. You work to your knife wall with that. You should be able to see the knife wall ever so slightly. And that's my dovetail, or those are my dovetails cut. So this has to go to the adjacent piece. So let's see, that's that one, not that one, that one. So this now goes like this onto the piece of wood. So let's lock this in the vise. I usually leave this up about the width of a plane, like that. And that just works as a table, because it's quite a long piece to be weighty on the other end to get this lined up. Okay, now where am I looking for? You could look for the end here. This feels quite flush, not quite, a little bit proud on one side, maybe. Feels great though. Okay, what I'm looking for is the internal corner, not the external one. And I'm lining this up because I know I cut fairly accurately. And I'm going with a knife to get right into the corner. And I start to do a pull, one. So I'm doing all those in the same direction first. And then I'm going to alter my body position to do the next one. I don't want any slippage at this point, and I don't want two lines. I just want that one line. So I've got my dovetails marked. They're not really very visible. Go with your square and the dovetail square aspect of your template. And pull those lines that will guide your vertical cut. And this, we want this square, but we also want it to follow the dovetails as exactly as we can get it. There it is. So I've marked this on the outside face, so I've got my tails in place. Low in the vise to stop vibration. And now we're going to cut exactly to that knife wall. I'm going to stop that fraction above the line again. So you're going right up to the knife wall. Let the saw do the work. Just the weight of your hand and the weight of your saw is what we're aiming for. I'm going to move my piece over to this side because I got better light on this side. Just that marginal shadow is putting me off. Oh, there, just about. See it? Gently up to your line. Now we're going to go back with the square. Drop it on here. This is going to go this way, so I'm turning this end for end here, and I just push with the square until this is flush with the end. And then I go in between the knife walls very gently with this first pass, not too deep. Same here. Now go back over it. And you can go more heavily now because you've given yourself a wall to push up against in the wood with the square aligned for safety. On this one corner, make a small nick. It doesn't matter whether you do that one or this one. Stand up and make another small nick. That gets you exactly 90 degrees to the other side, so that when you pair cut to the end grain in these recesses, you've got a dead 90 going across this very short distance from the outside of the box to the inside. Okay. Down in the vise, see I've got it low down, and that brings everything to a height that I can really manage quite well. I've got a 5/8 chisel which will work great on this. If you have a 1/2 inch, that will work too. 5/8 is quite an unusual size, but it's not essential, it's just nearer to the width of the opening. So I chisel in and then I lift up on that last little bit like that, and that breaks the grain along the grain to the exact depth of my vertical knife wall. This is the outside of the box. Flick those pieces out of the way. Keep the bench top clean so that you're not hammering on top of those little pieces which will telegraph into the wood quite deeply. So gently again, listen. I could go twice as hard, but I'd move the knife wall, and that's what makes the dovetail so precise. If you can resist that heavy hammer, you'll keep the knife wall on its original path. I don't know what time we started this, but it's probably about 10 minutes, something like that. So I'm pretty close to putting this together, and that's how long it's going to take, times 4, to do your corners of the box. So I'm getting this aligned with my saw kerf as near as I can in the corner. Tap, go for the dead sound, and no further. Into the vise. Then you're not slipping around. Your vise is your third hand. Work both sides while you're in this position. And if you don't have a really solid vise, just clamp this to the bench top with a clamp and do exactly what I'm doing. Always blowing off the bench top, keeping it clean. This is where I start to angle over just to follow the rake of my dovetail. Now I'm not going to move the knife wall now, no matter how hard I hit, but I am conscious of I don't want to bruise my material, I don't want to damage my tools, so I'm conscious all the time of being considerate, because that's what makes us artisans. I'm just almost halfway through. I won't be far off. So I've angled in the opposite direction this time. Still follow. I didn't mean that to happen. That just went. So I didn't actually hit the bench. That did the same. So I'm going to pop it like that because I know it'll come through. I'm not hitting the bench, people. That one's not going. And this will have as much to do with the grain orientation as anything, whether it goes all the way through in that single cut. And I did notice more resistance on this particular dovetail when I was chopping it before. This is the outside facing up. This will go this time. So into your vise, just to clean out the end grain and make sure you don't have any rise in the middle. So I'm rocking the chisel, pressing down with my thumb on top of the chisel, cleaning right into the corners where you're more likely to have a little bit of build-up, a little bit in the middle, a bit of a rise in the middle, but you're not undercutting. That's not the goal. You really don't want to undercut if you can avoid it. That's my pear cutting done. I don't have anything to do on the walls that I can see, so let's take this piece now and see how it feels. Feels pretty good. One last thing here, a little trick of the trade. If you just take the chisel right on the internal corner, just to put a leading edge in there, the dovetail will go in more readily, but you won't compromise the strength of your dovetail. So this goes on here. I'm just using my fist, but if your muscle hasn't built up enough, use the chisel hammer. We're good. So there is my dovetail. I'm happy with it. Everything will clean up. When I come to plane this, I'll plane all these flush and then I'll glue them. So we got 4 to do, another 3 left. I'm transferring the dovetail lines from the first dovetail to get everything identical. And there is no point in laying them out by measurement. You may as well do it straight from the first one, which you measured and laid out, and then everything will look wonderful when you come to cut the dovetail. They will be equally spaced, they will be identical in positioning and everything. I flush the outside with my fingertips to get the exact thickness of the side for that particular corner. And then I go in between the saw kerfs with the knife to get the wall established, the knife wall established. This is in preparation for removing the pin recesses. The knife wall makes everything so precise and there is no discrepancy, there is no variance. You go straight up against the knife wall on the waste side of the wood. This little step down gives a place for the saw to sit in the recess, like there now the saw teeth are right in the recess to start the cut, square across and now square down. I'm paring the end of the end grain because the saw will leave some fuzzy surfaces and you just want to get them smooth because those fuzzy surfaces can hold the shoulder line off, not just on that piece but in another section too. I always cut from both sides to get that waste wood out. I like this method better than the coping saw method. I used the coping saw method for about 3 decades, but then gradually I graduated towards this because I feel so much better about my work. It takes just a little bit longer, but not massively so. I just like this pear cutting and everything. It's just so nice. I mark each corner according to A, B, C, and D usually, or A, B, C, and X, because a D can look like an A. So I just avoid confusion that way. Just the weight of your hand, no downward pressure. Just let the weight of the saw and the weight of your hand do the work. Good relaxed cut, firm but relaxed. I calculate usually it takes me about 20 minutes to half an hour to cut a corner of a dovetail, regardless of what the size is. Of course, a wider section with 5 or 6 dovetails takes longer, but generally 2 to 3 dovetails will take 20 minutes to half an hour. Especially if you're using an easy wood like oak is very easy to work with. So I'm working from both sides. I choked up on my chisel. I didn't chop into my bench top. Now pair cutting any rise in that midsection, but not undercutting. Try the best you can do not to undercut. It's a bad habit. I'm using my fist because I've done it for 50 years, nearly 60. But use a hammer. If your fist is not toughened up and you're not used to it, just use the rubber side of your chisel hammer and tap it together. Now we see all the dovetails coming together. While it's together, I put it in the vise, make sure it's clamped securely in the vise, and then I work round the rim and feel for the grain direction, making sure I don't just plane those through cuts without thinking and thought. I work round the corner. Like there, I'm working around the corner. If you see me go over the corner, it's because I know that one part is higher than the other, so I'm confident that I won't be splitting off the outcut. So I'm planing the nubs of the dovetail down while it's hammered together. So I made sure it was together. I remarked it for the numbering or for the marking, so I know which one goes where when I dismantle it. And planing the nubs off is just good because when you come to clamp, you're not waiting. Now look here, I've put a piece of wood, a sacrificial piece, on the outcut so that I can plane. Because the grain, you can see how the grain is rising up on that edge. If I planed in the other direction, it would tear. So I put the sacrificial piece so I can plane a through cut without jeopardizing the outside of the corner of my box. Here, I'm putting that little wedge in. Something is not quite clamping that piece of wood. It could be that my sacrificial piece is curved slightly or something. So I put the wedge in just to support it. If you don't do that, then there'll be a gap and it will tear the end grain of your dovetails, and you don't want that. So I'm marking this for front, back, top, things like that, so I know exactly how it's going to go when I get to it. Here's my lid piece. So I've got quite a bit of work to do. So I've chosen the direction, I've chosen where it's going to go, marking it for face, marking it for front, marking it for top, all those kind of things. Now I've squared one end. I want to make sure one end is dead square, and then I can mark this for length and cross cut it. Checking myself for thickness, I want it to be parallel, and the reason I'm using the gauge to get the exact size is I want to put a planted rebate on there. A planted rebate is an appliqued piece of wood, a strip of wood that goes round 3 sides of the box. It goes along the front edge and the 2 sides because that supports the box lid. On the back edge, you've got the screws that will go in place that will be the pivot point for the lid, and that doesn't need a rebate on the back. It doesn't hit it because it just doesn't need it. There's my strip cut to length. Even out the glue with the best digit you can use for that, and clamp it inside with some spring clamps if you've got them, or any clamp you have to hand. It's great. I like these for this, they're perfect. You don't need a lot of pressure, but the spring clamps are quite powerful. You can leave those for maybe an hour or something like that. You can get away with less, but I think I'd leave it for an hour. We've got to fit the lid and the bottom to this box, and I'm still not glued up, but what I do first of all is I check from corner to corner. You can go internal corner or external corner. If the measurement is the same, then your box is square, and mine is square. I'm checking on the outside now. Double check, no problem with that. Yep. Great, okay, so I am square. Can you check your box with the square this way? Generally, no. In this case, it is square, but generally I wouldn't do that. And why is that? Because one side can be slightly curved, something like that. If there's a slight difference in length, then it will be whacked out when you go corner to corner, and that's what we generally do. So the first thing is I've straightened this edge. That's my straight edge. Checked it, made sure it's straight, and this edge is square. Offer it to the box and see how it looks on the end. So I need to take a shaving off there, and I'm going to go to my clamping the vise one. So straight edge goes against this long edge here. Now you can do this freehand. You can just put it in the vise and plane it too if you want to. So I'm going to clamp these two together. Make sure the long edge of the box lid is against the stop on the guide. And all I do is drop this in, cinch it tight, and then set my plane to a shallow setting and take a shaving. So I'm using this platform here to guide me, and that should give me a square edge. I'm going to cut this to length shortly, so I'll be cutting and cross-cutting and showing exactly how we get there with that. Doesn't really matter which edge I put this against. So that looks like I'm ever so slightly out. No, I'm good. So I offer this again to the box now to see how it looks, and there's no gap there, and I've got it there. So what I can do next is just stand this up on the end, or gauge it against the end, and put a small knife nick here, and I'm going to do the same on the front, and I'm going to cut it to the box. If my box was slightly out of parallel, I mean, we're talking a paper thickness, I would probably just leave it. And that can happen even to the best of us. So there's my knife nick. Slide up. Now I'm not on the knife nick at that end, but I'm going to go with this back knife nick. I'm only a paper thickness out, and I will plane this then to fit that. Oh man, it's so minimal, it's just not even a paper thickness. So we square this all the way around, and then we cross cut with a tenon saw, or if you've got some other method you want to use, sure, go ahead. Down to the front. I'm careful here because if a miscut here, an undersized cut could ruin my box, so I'm being careful. There's one more thing that I have to do, and that is I've got to... Now I can see a discrepancy there, so I'm going to go to the long point, and then I'll plane it to fit. This happens sometimes, we're just a fraction out, so we cut it to length. What I probably should have done, no, you can plane it to width after you've cut it to length. I'm going to cut it to length, and then I'm going to go in, and I'm going to plane this so that it's tight on the back edge, and I'm going to make this a 1/16 of an inch narrower than the opening. I want the gap on the front. Why do I want the gap on the front? Because this grain could swell inside the box and jam. So I don't mind the gap, I like the gap, and that's what I'm going to shoot for, because this is the part of the design of the box. I've considered it, and I'm still going to go with it. So that's my choice. I did my cross cut, I did my knife walls all the way around, and then I went in to plane up the ends doing it this way. I've done it this way all my life without any kind of guide, and it works fine. You just have to have a good sharp plane and work carefully. But here's my guide. This is my vertical planing guide that I use a lot now. I didn't used to use it, but I use it more and more because it guarantees the end grain is dead square when I've done, and it's an amazing piece of kit, really. So now I'm fitting it into the opening. I want it to be fairly snug to start with, and then I'll take it a little bit more later. I'll fit it with a space of about, so little. 0.5 millimeter on each side, something like that. Now it's going in, so I'm making sure it goes in. I'm going to push it against the back edge and then check it for squareness to the end, and I can work out exactly how much I want to take off. So I made a couple of pencil marks there, and I'll work to those pencil lines. I want a bigger gap between the front edge of the lid and the front edge of the box, because this wood could expand if it goes into a humid house, perhaps. So I've actually left mine roughly about 1/16 of an inch as a standard gap, because it could swell. There I'm checking for parallelity, seeing how I feel about it. This is what you do in the zone. So that's determining the width of the bottom to go into the recess, and it'll rest on those bearers, those strips that we made and glued in place. So I'm cutting it down to width now. What you're seeing now is I already cut about 2/3 of the way along the length, and now I've come in from the other end, so I've anchored it back in the vise. It's the same piece of wood. Truing up the edge, taking out the saw kerf. So I'm checking it to see if it goes in. Now I'm cutting it to length, so I've got to mark it to length. Minus the 32nd, something like that would be fine. You could go up to 1/16 and make it shorter. There will be no shrinkage or no discernible shrinkage in the length. The only place you'll get shrinkage will be in the width. But the dovetails are certainly strong enough, so you can cut it tight on the width as well if you want to. It would not swell the sides or damage the joinery if you were to cut it tight. I prefer to leave a little space, I think, personally. So knife wall all round, and then I'm cutting to length, just using a tenon saw. I'm flipping over because the bench is getting in the way, and with it being such a thin piece. Trimming off the end, just a few shavings, not much. Notice I didn't plane all the way through. I lift the plane up on that last little bit so that I don't split the wood. There it is, fitted in place, quite nice, quite tight. It's a wonderful project for initial joinery. If you've never done any hand-cut dovetails, this is a great place to start. And now we're going to do a very simple mortise and tenon joint. It's got a little kind of a nuance to it because it's going to be, I kept my stick long, and you might want to do that just for gripability as you're working it, but we're going to put a tab into this, a mortise hole 3/4 of an inch deep, a tenon 3/4 of an inch long, things like that. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to keep it this length just because it's more convenient for me to work with. So let me erase some of my pencil lines, because we've got shaping to do on this after we've done the initial mortise and tenoning. So let's go ahead and put a knife wall all the way around. This tenon is going to have 4 shoulders, so it's going to have a shoulder to each face as we work round. So I'm measuring, that's 3/4 of an inch, and I'm making a knife wall. I'm not going with pencil lines because this is going to get all the shoulder lines done in one neat action. So into your knife nick on the corner, this will just guarantee, hopefully, that all your shoulder lines come out on one corner and they're all dead on, hopefully. Let me see where we go. We are dead on. What I'm going to use is a mortise guide, and this is a 1/4 inch mortise guide. This is 3/4 inch, the top is 3/4 of an inch. This is 5/8 of an inch, so we can only use one side. So I'm going to use this, just declare this to be my top, put this onto here and make a pencil line. This is going to be close enough for us to work to. We don't have to use a mortise guide. A mortise gauge. I think you'll enjoy this bit. So that's the top of the tenon, and now we're going to make the mortise hole is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So I need to find, there's my 1/4 inch chisel. I'm going to place this on here like this and just make that second line parallel to the guide. This is just a quick way of dealing with it. It's like juggling with chisels though, so be careful. I'm always into speeding up processes. So the chisel is going to govern the size of the mortise hole. Looks like I slipped a bit there. Yeah. So let me put this on here. So I've got my guideline. I know this is the top. So we're going to cut the tenon, cut the mortise. The mortise this is a 1 inch piece of wood that's going to go in here. So let's take a look at the this should be 10.5, yeah. So if we come in, 5.25 is center, and if I go back a 1/2 inch from there, that should be the start of my mortise. Let me put another one there, and then I'm going to check myself to see how close I am. So 4.75 and 4.75. That's great. So I'm going to put these marks. See, this is going to center the tongue, this tenon piece and the mortise in the lid. This is my layout getting done quickly. I want the top of the tongue that's going to be sticking out to be flush with the top of the box lid. So now then I need the guide. I'm just putting these on for you to be able to see really. So there is my mortise guide, and there is my chisel. That's going to give me a 1/4 inch shoulder on both sides. And that is the position of the mortise hole. So I want this to be dead on, but I've got to take off a little bit on each side. So I'm going to take off, what did I say? I'm going to take off 3/16 on each side. Oh no, 3/16 on each side, like that. That way, if there's any shrinkage, this is just a principle really. If there was any shrinkage, there would be no gap on the sides of the mortise hole. So that's the extreme of my mortise hole. So it's narrower by 3/8 of an inch than the overall width. So that's my mortise hole. Now I line up my jig with this. Now this isn't quite so easy because, make sure you've got the top. It's not so easy to get this in the vise with this. So I'm going to go with 2 clamps on here. Normally I like the mortise guide to be clamped in the vise, but I can't do that. So I'm going to go with couple of clamps to clamp this to my wood. The wonderful thing about this mortise guide is you're guaranteed to be parallel pretty much to the outside surface of your piece. And that's why we invented this mortise guide, because people weren't parallel and that meant something was tipping often. So here we go. So I'm staying away from that first knife wall a little bit and working away, keeping the chisel aligned with the mortise guide. And now I'm going to work up to that knife wall a little bit at a time. And we're only going 3/4 of an inch deep, so it's not very deep at all. Once you've gone in a little bit, and you're moving across your piece, you'll be able to lever a little bit against the end, but you don't want to lean all the way and bruise the wood too much. So I usually go with a narrower chisel when I start to clean out the mortise hole. Keep your chisel registered against that wall as much as you can. Here's my narrower chisel. I'm going to go right onto my knife wall now. Chop down. Now it's starting to get tight in this narrow space, this chisel. But that's what we really wanted using this guide, is to reduce the amount that we wallow out the walls of the mortise hole as we go deeper. So how deep are we? Let's take a look. So I'm not quite 7/8 of an inch, so I'm really down to the kind of depth I want to go to. On one side, that doesn't mean I'm parallel to the top yet. So I'm just using this narrower chisel just to tease out the fibres, the waste wood that's down in the bottom of here. And I'm going to check on this side. This side is likely to be less. So I'm just under 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to go deeper. A little bit. That's really it. So would I pare down the wall? I think I would. Let me get rid of some of this waste out first. Try not to lever on the end of the mortise. So there we go. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, we're just over that 3/4 inches deep. I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch chisel and pare down this one wall like this. I'm already there. The chisel lined up perfectly. So we're going to do the tenon next. I'm looking down inside to make sure I'm parallel. It looks good. So now I've got to cut this. So that's my top. little bit of a fine saw for this, really. Take a look at this and see how I feel. Looks great. Drop your hand, follow the line. On a bigger tenon, I would probably turn it around like this and come from both sides. But on a small tenon, you're not going to deviate. On a short one like this, I doubt whether you will deviate very much. Let me just check myself. You don't want to go past the shoulder line because it'll show on the side of your tenon when you've done. I'm just going to eyeball this for center on here. I've got the lines, so line it up with the lines, and then that's going to be great. I'm going to cut the cheeks first. Stop shy of your shoulder line. I'm going to put the saw straight onto the shoulder on the back on there, and then I just drop my hand with those opening strokes and I cut away from the knife wall, so I've got a little bit of a rise on the end grain fibres because I can pare that down, and it guarantees that I don't go into the face somewhere that will be showing after I've done. I'm going to pear cut these shoulders with a narrower chisel. Make sure you're good and secure. So I place this right onto the knife wall, pear cut. So I'm going in between the shoulder, the outside edges of the shoulder. Hopefully I'll have a perfectly clean. Again, I'm not trying to undercut. I don't undercut generally. And I'm going to pare from my knife wall in towards the tenon cheek, like that. And these can always be fitted more after you've got this fitting into its mortise hole. I'm going to take the corner off with my chisel, so I've gone bevel down about maybe 1/8 of an inch down, and I pop it like this. And that gives me a bevel, that gives me a nice leading edge into the mortise. And then here I go again. Just take that corner off, and that will just help to ease it into the mortise hole. Now my tenon may still be fat yet, I don't really know. This is the top face. I don't want it to be too tight because it can tighten up in the mortise and split the wood. So which was my top face? Did I have one? Not really. I'm going to go, yeah, I do that one there. That seems a little bit tight. I think that works for me. So let's take that out, if we can get it out now. Sometimes when you have it as tight as that, when you start tapping it out, it can pull the wood out of its socket. So we want a good fit, not an overly tight fit. That was a nice fit, really. So we've got some shaping to do on this. This overall length from the shoulder is going to be 1 1/8. So we can measure that. 1 1/8. Okay, square that line around, but the front edge of this is going to be tapered and beveled and all kinds of things. So I'm just going to make this line go around. It doesn't have to be a knife wall particularly for this, because we're going to be shaping this with a rasp. Okay, so this is the narrower shoulder, that's the bottom. And I'm coming down from that top edge there, 1/4 inch. There's my 1/4 inch. Transfer to this side, 1/4 inch. And then we're going to take about 3/16 from the shoulder. So let's say it is 3/16. I know that's 3/16. And then take a line to those 2 crosshairs. And this is going to be shaped, and it's going to leave a shoulder. So if I cross-cut this now, this is so much fun. Just square across, drop your hand to the square line, and then your saw will automatically follow that. It won't deviate at all. Gently. Can you see the line? I've got to cut to that line, so I've got it on both sides. Let me go ahead and use the tenon to hold it. Pull that line across that front edge. And now we've got this awkward. I'm going to use a different saw this time. Use a slightly bigger one. So I've got the shoulder up against the vise. I've not got it very tight, have I? Up against the vise, the top edge of the jaw. And I'm getting very close to wanting to finish this box ready for gluing, and I'm close to that now. I'm just using the Shinto rasp, but you could use a chisel, or you could plane it if you're good with the plane. I'm working to that line that I put on there. There, I've got that done. Now then, what we're going to do is we're going to take a compass, and we're going to set the compass to 1 inch. And I'm going to mark a distance from the front edge onto the piece of wood, and then mark the center of that 1 inch with a 1/2 inch mark in the middle. That's going to be the point for my compass. So I've got these set at 1 inch, and then make a mark. Oops. Must have moved, sorry. And that's going to give me a radius on the front of that little handle. I want it slightly rounded just because it looks more attractive. Just work to your line. Then take a flat file and clean that up. Same on this side. And we have a handle on this. Step back and look at it before you finish it. See how it looks. It looks pretty good. I've left some pencil line in for some reason. When you've got that far, just take your flat file and break the edges all the way around. Then erase your pencil lines. And that's your handle. So we're ready to glue this in. We can glue this in. I'm going to leave it for now. I'm not going to glue it in just yet because I may need to do a little bit more fitting after I've got the lid in place. There it is. Very nice little handle. That's going to fit in here perfectly. We're going to do the flip lid soon. We've got to fit the lid. I've got a little bit of fitting, cleaning up on the outside of the box to do. Would I do that now? I think I probably would, because once you get the box lid in and everything, you can't really apply loads of pressure like you might be able to do now. So I'm just going to walk you through cleaning up the outside of the box. It's not always that easy because the grain can run in a different direction. So I can plane from this end in that direction, but I cannot plane that direction without some kind of tactic. So we're going to just clean up the outside of the box. Mostly is just a little bit. I've got a good sharp plane, hopefully. And I'm going to do this end, so I'm going to put it in the vise at the other end so I'm not overhanging and levering against myself. So I've got the stem in the vise, but I've also got this top part in the vise so as not to put any strain on. A box this size with these dovetails is not going to be overly strained. So I'm making sure my plane is set shallow. I take off the first nub and then I move to the second, third and fourth. And now I'm planing through a little bit because I'm going with the grain. So I'm taking advantage of that, and this is where we get the issue because I can't plane all the way through. This will break. I'm looking at the grain again and I feel like the grain is running up that way, so I have to plane from this corner out. Try it and see what we get. So I start on the right hand side. I just take a skewed cut, move over the first nub, move into the second. And yes, the grain is in my favor, but I can't plane through again. Take a look at this one. We're reading the grain the whole time. I believe that's the one I just did, right? Yeah. So this one has got to go this way. These are really worth noting, and this is where we really learn to read the grain. Now I did this before when I made the joints initially, but just the clamping of the joints and the compression of the end grain fibers when those joints go together change that dimension when you clamp it together. So you will end up with some protrusion. So I've got all of those going in the right direction, and this is where we add a scrap of wood. This is going to go on here. I've cut this to the right size, and now I've got to get this in the vise. It will go that way. If it didn't, I could go on the other side of the vise and just clamp the two pieces together. This is a little bit tricky. What I want to do is leave it loose enough to tap it near flush, or a little bit past. That's it. So I want it to be deep enough in the vise to make sure the stem, this long length, is in the center of the top edge of the vise, so that I can apply the right pressure. I've got good pressure, I think. So now, again, I'm starting over one side, working to the other, and then back. That looks perfect. That's very nice. Always go a little bit extra. So that's how I'm going to do the opposite one while I've got this length on. I've got there's quite a bit of protrusion on this one, on these here. And if I put this against it, I can see there's a gap between the pins and this support. That would not work. So I'm going to do this one first. So these are small considerations, because that small gap can make a difference when it comes to the supported fibers. So we have to get this right. We can't have any mistakes. Down in the vise, make sure you've got the long stem in place. Now it seems like I'm going against the grain right on this corner here. So I'm going to be careful when I get to that bit. So I'm just aligning this as near as I can. So this has now got me ready for shaving, for sanding a little bit. So I've got that down, and now I can do this long one. as I planned before. So I'm making sure, when I put this on, I'm making sure that I don't have any gaps. That's why you see me rotating this, because there can be a gap for whatever reason. A little bit of a cup in my sacrificial board, that kind of thing. A little bit tedious, and I know it's probably a little bit boring to watch, but without this, we can ruin a whole box. So I'm going for a whole length shave all the way through, just to get that continuity on the surface so I don't have any step downs, things like that. I've got one more to do. That one's done. Actually, this one feels like it's done. I'm gonna, yeah. This is showing the grain going up this way and then up this direction, so it's not quite so definitive. So I could end up with a mistake here, but I'm going to try it and see what I get. Once we've done this, we're ready to start thinking about the lid going on. But I want this clear surface for a few reasons. Putting this backer piece in, this sacrificial piece, just gives me the confidence to plane all the way through. And I think that's very, very important, that you have that confident stroke to get continuous shavings all the way through. The underside's nice and level, I leveled the top. So that's it. Now then, if you remember, we put that strip of wood inside, so that's going to determine that that's the front. I've got these two stems here I'm sticking inside the box, leaning against the back wall, and that's left my top to go in the back so it's supported. I'm dropping this in onto those two pieces. Checking myself, I've got a little bit of play in the length, probably less than a 32nd. So what I'm going to do is push this to one end, like that, and making a knife mark, not a pencil mark, on this right-hand side. Let's see if I can put... So I've pushed it up against that side and making a small nick on the back edge. And then I'm pushing it back to the other end, and that's going to give me a gap. Now, whether that gap is going to be big enough, I don't know. I'm going to put a pencil line as a second marking. I want a gap on each side of my tab. I don't want it to be a tight fit. There would be no reason for it to be a tight fit. So now there I am in my knife nick. That's going to give me that 32nd on each side of the tab when I'm done, I hope. And I can move this, I can make this bigger if I want to. What I can't do is make it smaller. Okay, now I'm going to put my box lid back in place and turn it upside down. Well, that's close enough. And I just want this distance, that 1/2 inch plus that 1/16. So I'm going to measure across there at that point, because that's going to tell me how far to cut down on that outside face. And I need to cut down just under 1/2 inch. So I'm going to set this to 1/2 inch, just under that, just under a 1/2 inch. I might go as much as a 32nd under the 1/2 inch. because I can always pare down if I want to. But it's actually not relying on this tab as the stop, it's going to rely on that long strip on the inside. So the reason I did that is because this is where, that's the point where it's going to have contact. Out here it's not going to have contact. So I've gone that little bit more, and then the bottom of this is 5/8 of an inch from the top. So if I go down 5/8 of an inch on the inside, just close enough. We don't have to be too exact at this point because, as I said, nobody will ever see inside this box to see what I did. I'm going to square that line down now with the knife, which is where you really hope you get this right. Can't feel that. There it is. And I'm going to go down on the inside just to stop the fibers from fraying. That should do it. Feels so chunky now, this box does. It's so very solid. Right up against that knife wall. Drop your hand and follow the rake. Now I'm going to go down at an angle to that 5/8 mark. This is where a little bit tricky here. I want to take off some of this wood. So I've gone down to my pencil line. I'm going bevel down now and just chopping just to get the grain direction. Making sure I'm going with the grain. Can take a little bit more off here. And then the midsection comes out. I'm not going to hammer. I'm going to try and pear cut. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today. See my chisel? You probably can't see this, but my chisel is going slightly on askew. It gives me a better pear cut to start out with. Close to my pencil line now. This back edge can fracture if you're not careful. I don't think I'm quite deep enough on the right side with my saw curve. So we've got that down. Now we have a choice. We could go with a rasp or something like that. I'm going to go with the chisel bevel down and chisel in and down to the angle I want. Same on this side, so I chisel in, take off the bulk, chisel in, and then that scalloping cut down. So that's the final depth on the bottom, a little bit more on the top, and then move across. Just take off some of that dead wood on the top we don't really need, that waste wood. Now I'm on the leading edge and I'm just pear cutting, rocking the chisel. And I think that feels close. Let's give it a shot, see what we got. So there's my back edge going on. Okay, I got to go deeper on the back edge. And that's because I stepped in that 1/8 of an inch. So I need a little bit more saw kerf here. Looks like it's holding it off about 1/8 of an inch. And that's because on this edge here, I came 1/8 of an inch that way. So we'll take off a little bit more. You know, when you do that rocking motion, you're feeling for the parting of the fibers. Or I am. I want to get this right, even though, as I said, the tab isn't really the registration surface, it's going to be that point inside. I think maybe one more 1/16 will do that. What do I want, the knife, I think? So it's almost down to the top of that bearer on the inside. So feel for the fibers, feel for the best pairing direction to go in. That is close enough. I'm flush here, a little bit high on this side. That could be those two stems inside. I'm close enough for now because I can pair cut more if I want to, but it looks really nice. And I can see a little discrepancy, but on this distance on this side is more than on this side. But what I've got enough to do now is I have enough to start laying out for the hinge pins that are going to go in there. So those are going to be screws. When we get to that, when I get to that, I'll whack everything out and make everything look good. But right now, I want to get these two screws in here, and this is going to open up a whole new concept to you because you've probably never seen this in your life. We're ready to start putting the hinge, they're not really hinges, they're two screws that are going to go in through the sides. These have got dome heads on. Of course, those wouldn't look too great if we left the dome heads on. So we'll show you how we get to that. I made two shims to go in here. When I put them in, they should theoretically push the top of the lid against that back wall of the box, which they have. I've still got to round this back corner off. That's going to have a quadrant on the corner, and that's going to allow the box to rotate and open up just fine. When I was talking about whacking things out, when I made the lid and put it in, I left a 30-second extra on this side, but it didn't work. So I have to now go in afterwards and make a new knife wall there with a knife and then pair cut down to get it equal to this side. And that's all going to work just fine when I get to it. So that just gives you my English vernacularism for making something even. Okay, now where we're going now is we're going to take this. I've got two stems, those two little stems of wood that were temporary in the back. I taped them in the back just to hold them in place so that this was level to the level that I wanted. I've put the two shims in because I want to clamp this. So I'm going to clamp this now because I've got to drill holes and I've got to drill them very precisely. So this will secure the lid, stop it from shifting and shunting. I'm going to drop it in the vise for security. And now we have to do a little bit of measuring to get these two holes on each side exactly opposite each other. So I've got brass screws with a brass head, and it's a domed head because right in between the seat of the hinge and the bottom of the slot is about 1 millimeter, somewhere close to a 1/16 almost. They don't exactly exchange very well. So we're going to be filing out that top of the dome later, but for now we've got some measuring to do. From the internal corner of the, you've got to make sure you get this in the right place too. I'm going to measure from that inside 7/16 of an inch. So from the bottom of the dovetail, I'm coming 7/16 and making a mark. This has to be exactly the same on this side as it is on the other side. It's got to be dead on. I'm going to check myself as I go. I know this seems a little tedious sometimes, but I don't have a chance to make a mistake now. This is so important on this point in the box. I sharpen my pencil with sandpaper, which I very, very rarely do, because I wanted that pinpoint accuracy, and I'm coming down from the top of the box 3/8 of an inch. You saw me switch to the square. So I'm going to bring in a second square, if I can find one. There's one. And set this one up. So I've got that one set. I'm going to have this one set. What did I say it was? Oh, somebody gave me a metric square. I said 3/8 of an inch. Got you. So I'm setting this one, so I'm going to do them the same on the opposite edge. That way, even if this measurement was out slightly, it would at least be the same on both ends. I'm taking an awl, I'm putting the point right on the crosshair, step back a little bit, take a look at it, see if you need to nudge it over. It's looking pretty good. So that's fairly accurate now, I think. Let's give it a little depth. So I'm going to use 3 drill bits, one small, one mid, and one larger. So this one takes, the first one, the small one, takes the main body of the screw but not the threads. The next one takes the whole of the screw shank with the threads. That means that the screw will pass through that hole without catching on anything. And the third one is going to take the head of the screw. So let's start with the first one. And we can go as deep as we like with this one. So I've got to go through the 1/2 inch and into the main lid. So I've gone about 1/8 of an inch past that. Drop it straight onto that. And then work as perpendicular as you can into that second piece, all the way down. Make sure the chuck is not drilling the surface of the box or marring it. Now we've got to go through that first one into the second one, through the first level, but not into the second one. I'm going to put a mark on of that 1/2 inch, just so I'm sure not to go too deeply. You've got to be careful with this one, because this can pull the drill into the surface of the wood. So I'm pulling back on the drill now. I just heard it hit that other surface. Now this next one, I'm going to do this afterwards, but this will now take the main body of the screw. So I may as well put that in now, and we'll drill that third hole afterwards, because I want to try the lid. We'll be going in and out with the screws to make those micro adjustments, things like that. So let's set this screw. I used the wax on the screw to ease it into the wood, and it still feels a little bit tight. Turn over. I'm going to put the clamp back on and that wood back in. I just don't want to strain the screw or strain the box in any way. Still flush. If it's not dead flush, if it's a shaving under or over, you can always shave the lid, the rim of the box later, if that's what you want to do. You can. sometimes it's worth doing that rather than altering things too much. Make sure you drill in the right places. So now we have these set. Now then, that was 7/16 from the inside. I'm going to check myself. You know, this could be slightly thicker on one side than the other. So 7/16 from that mark. See, that is way out. Let me check myself. Did I alter this? I could have altered it. I did alter it. Why did I alter it? Not very clever. There it is. Can't believe I did that after telling you what to do, not doing it myself. Sorry about that. So let's get rid of that mark. And I'm still going to check myself with the ruler. I trust myself less and less as I get older and older. Great. This one is here. I love it when these, I made that pencil point so sharp that these look like, get yourself, you have to keep nudging that hole over slightly to get it right usually. So I'm going to, I'm still checking myself. I'm going to do it. I don't care how this works for everybody. Yeah, we're dead on. Okay. Small screw hole first. So stand back, eyeball it a little bit, see how you're doing. That looks fine. All the way through. We definitely want this to bite. Okay. I'm just going with a flathead screw for this. I don't think they do a dome head screw with a cross head in it, do they? Okay, I'm going to take it out because we can't open this without that back corner being rounded over. So that's what I'm going to do straight away, is round over that back edge. And then we can try this and see how we did. I'm not sure why this screw seemed to take, it was a lot harder to get in even though I did everything exactly the same. So we're just rounding the top corner, that quadrant on the very top corner. All the bits of shavings are in there. I need these two pieces, do I? Maybe not, but I'll keep them just in case. So we're going to do this round edge on the top edge. Make sure you get the right edge. What I suggest you do is make a pencil line about 1/4 of an inch in from that top corner on both edges, both faces. Check yourself for grain direction and then start shaving. I'm going to go with a scrub plane first, just to take off the bulk. keep it nice and even. Okay, I'm going to skip that now and go to my smoothing plane. And I may have to do more of this to fit it afterwards, but so I'm coming onto the flat on the top and then back round. I'm looking for that line just to keep it even, really. And I'm going with the grain. You can hear that I'm going with the grain. Now I'm going to back off my iron and go a little bit more shallow. I'm going to take an iris off this corner. I've got a flexible scraper just to pull along those edges. And there's no point in me sanding this yet because I may need to take more off. But this will just take off the corners of the irises that I just probably created. Now then, on the back edge, I didn't have any gap because it was cranked up against that back edge, remember? So I'm going to take a couple of shavings here, just to give me a small gap, hopefully. That should do it. Rest it on those two bits. I'm going to lift it. I think it might work at that. I really don't know yet. Pop those two in. Just give them a little bit of a turn. Now it's probably resting on the top of those two pieces. It might, yeah, they do. They're holding it back, so should have thought of that. I can take them out now. Just makes it hard to get the lid in after. These are the two stems. So I just tape them in the corner to stop them dropping over. So I'm going to press down on the tab and lower. Do I have enough strength? I don't. Try again. Look at that, looking pretty good. I've got a slightly uneven gap on the back, which I think will be corrected with a few shavings somewhere, but not enough to cause me a problem. And it's closing very nicely, even though it's still a little bit too tight, I think. But there we go. So what's the next? I've got to even out this gap here. I'll just mark it while we've got this with a knife wheel. So I'm just coming on this side of the tab, eyeballing it for the center on that side, making a knife wheel. That's it. So when I take these out now, I'm going to do a little bit more fitting for the lid, and then I'm going to drill the holes a little bit deeper to take the head of the screw. And we're ready to almost finish this box. This is where I check everything for alignment, put the screws in place, see how I feel, and then I tighten them a little again to see how I feel about them, so both sides. I'm checking also on the back edge of the box. You can see a slight gap on one end and it might not be parallel, so I may use a bullnose plane on the corner only just to get a parallel alignment. Not complicated. I'm pretty confident with my plane work, and now you can always mark it with a pencil or a cut line and take it out and plane it. So everything's lining up very nicely now. So I'm taking the screws out. I want to make a couple of things, a couple of adjustments. See there, I'm using the ruler to get a parallel line to the lid. That's just helping me sight where I see the bullnose going in now. So I'm cutting to a line that I marked on the edge. It's only a very small amount, but when you lift the lid up, it will show a parallel line. And when you close the lid, it should show a parallel line too. Minor discrepancies, but you can adjust them. See, I'm taking some off the lid as well to make the parallelity between the corner of the back edge of the box and the lid itself. So it's just a very small adjustment. I think finessing like this is so important. It makes such a huge difference. So I'm just breaking the edge with a couple of strokes of the plane. Notice the orientation of the plane so that I get a smooth, crisp corner. I like to use the sandpaper because it takes off some of the fibres that would otherwise lift when I apply the finish. So there is a reason to it. Some people just say, well, I don't use sandpaper, but I think I prefer to for most of my work because it helps the grain, raising the grain and so on. So when you do that first coat, you can just lightly sand it or abrade it, and then it won't rise again. I'm taking the tab handle out and then gluing it in place. It only needs glue. This is a bit of an overkill to do a full-blown tenon on there, but I just feel so much better. I've got something substantial that will probably last 500 years if it's not abused. I put the glue on the rim of the hole, and so that will go in with the tab as it goes. It's driven home. So I've drilled a hole that's exactly sized. I think it's 6.5 on mine, but it might vary according to your drill bit. So I've centered that hole over the hole on the side of the box that's going to take the screw, and I just go in 1 millimeter into the surface of the wood, and that piece of wood is there to stop the grain from rising and tearing. So you can see I've centered it over, or I'm centering it over, and then I lock it in place with a couple of clamps, micro adjust it with the hammer, and then I just go in just a little bit. Just enough to sink the screw head below the surface. And what I'm going to look for, see the screw I just screwed in place, I want that recess that takes the screwdriver to be slightly above the surface of the side of the box, so that when I file that screw down and take that head off, it'll be a clear through cut with the file that will leave a flat head. I just discovered a little bit of awkward grain that wasn't really planed out. So I'm using the number 80 scraper and then the card scraper just to scrape everything to a pristine surface. Can't do this once the box is together so easily. What I did then is I put this piece of plastic in between the two pieces of wood so that I could drill holes into the plastic. These will be pivot points. These will go on the pivot points and serve as a plastic washer between the sides of the box and the ends of the lid and be friction free, and it'll keep that parallelity I want between the two edges of the box. Otherwise it would slip from one side to the other. And it might catch. I'm using double-sided tape to tape the plastic washer in place. And the screw will pass through there when I'm done. That was just to pierce, that pencil point is just to pierce the double-sided tape, the double-sided tape. Again, small things make a big difference. These are the little intricate details we go to make sure the box functions nicely and everything looks parallel. These are the small things that make a big difference. So when you've got the tweaking done and you've got your box lid opening fine, everything's lined up, you've got good distances you're happy with, you're ready to go and burn the bridge that would take these screws out. Once you file these heads down flush with the surface, you can't reverse it. So here we go. This is where I am. I've enjoyed making this box very, very much. If you've never made a box, this is a great one to start with. It's not complicated. A few hand tools, some pieces of oak, half a dozen pieces of oak, and you've got it. So I've got to take the groove out, and I just try and keep my file as level with the surface as possible. And I keep my eye on the groove, on the bottom of the groove, to make sure that the wide surface of the screw underneath, beyond that bottom of the recess, is above, because if it's below, I can't. So if I pull my screwdriver towards the groove, I can feel it hit a very small lip there. So I feel pretty confident. Try and avoid hitting the surface of the wood at this stage until you get to those final strokes. You've got brass filings on the surface there. You'll see me blow them off, because if I don't, I'll press them into the surface. And they're not always easy to get out. So I'm getting close to the surface now, 0.5 millimeter or so. So now I'm actually hitting the surface of the wood and using it as my registration face. So I'm pressing down with my thumb on that far side and then pulling the file into it until it feels like I'm not taking any more metal off. Whoa, this is so nice. And when you see this, it will rotate with the screw thread. The screw thread is holding it. Let's go on this side this time. So this has bemused a lot of people, because I posted some of this to show what I was working on. And people wanted to know what kind of special hinge I had. And this is just the cost of 2 round head screws. The nice thing about brass is it's so easy to file. So, yeah, I'm just coming, now I can see I'm coming right up to the bottom groove in the bottom of the groove in the piece. You have to make sure you're below the surface enough so that you're not filing out the circle of the screw head. That's almost there. It's just a couple of shavings away. There I am. You'll see grain in the surface of the screw from the file. That's it. That's us done. So all we have to do is apply 2 or 3 coats of a finish that we like. There it is. So we've got the screw heads flush with the side. They may protrude just a hair, but that's fine. There you go. I'm using a gel finish here. It works very nicely, and it's about the simplest finish to apply. You literally pad it on and then wipe it off vigorously to get rid of the bulk of what you put on there. So now that my box is together, it's glued up and everything, and I've sanded and finished, made sure everything is to my liking, I go in with an applicator, which can, as in my case, I'm just using a piece of paper towel that you might use in the kitchen. It's good and robust, and it will apply the finish. You can wipe it on with this, and you can wipe it off with that paper finish if you want to. It's perfectly fine. You do have to watch some of these finishes because they are spontaneously combustible. So you've got to be careful with most oil finishes and just about any other finish you can care to name. So we're just going to be very cautious when we've completed this to put the paper towels or whatever we've been finishing with into an airtight container, and then we'll be safe. And make sure, I usually put mine outside as well, even in the airtight container, until I'm ready to dispose of them. So I've got the finish on the lid, I've got the finish inside. Now I've gone with a paper towel to wipe off any excess finish, and this will give me a super smooth finish when I get to it. I even do the underside of the box first, and that's just it gives it a nice quality feel when you finish the box. It looks great. The dovetails start to pop when you're making a box like this. That's always a pleasing part to it. And the finish is always fun, so it should be. You can't go wrong with these types of finishes, these gel finishes. You just wipe on and wipe off. They're easy, easy finishes. So I'm putting my paper towel into the glass jar, and now I'm going to put it outside when I'm done. I'll also close off my tin, make sure there's no contamination. Of course, once you've done that, you go in and you put the second coat on too. Leave this one, you need to leave for about 5 hours in between the coats, but I go in and put 2 or 3 coats, maybe 4 or 5 sometimes, depends on how the wood looks. If it looks, when I just cast the light on it, offer it to the light, if it looks full, then I don't need to apply anymore. By full, I mean you've got no blotchiness, and you have a nice, even, silky look to it. I've got my fingers where the finish is, so I've already got that on, but I'll go back in and wipe those areas where I'm touching with my rubber gloves now when I'm close to finish, and I'll just buff it off just like that. So there you have it, beautiful box, oak, very nicely made. I enjoyed doing it. I'm introducing this to you because this is a box that I'm going to auction. I don't auction my work very often. In fact, I'm not sure how many times I've done it in my life, but this is to benefit a local preschool that I have a family member that was a part of for a year, and I want to say thank you to them. So the proceeds from this, whatever benefit is in the auction, is going to go to the school to enhance their education program. So I'm really happy to do this. I hope you enjoy this.